Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Fintech Combine. I am your host, Kris Kovacs, and this is the series where we talk with and sometimes about community-based institutions, the digital and business transformation projects they have underway, and we meet the innovators, fintechs, and entrepreneurs that make it all possible. On this episode, we meet Evan Vaughan, who's software development manager at Lake Trust Credit Union, and we talk about how credit unions are developing software, the application of artificial intelligence, and what credit union executives and boards need to be thinking about heading into planning season. So if you're ready, let's suit up and get out on the field. Evan, I'm so excited to meet you today. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about your background and what your role is with the credit union?
Thanks, Kris. It's awesome to be here. So I've been at Lake Trust Credit Union for about 7 years. I started here as a software engineer, and now I manage a team of developers, a pretty big team. We've grown in size. I've been developing software for about 20 years in the financial services sector, graduated from Michigan Tech, and it's been a great experience, a lot of exciting stuff going on, and started out in the insurance industry and then kind of got more and more into the financial side of things, and then, got into the credit union space. So my role is really at this point managing a team of software developers, and we write custom software for the credit union that really ranges from back-end integrations all the way up to the front-end member-facing apps.
Very cool. Very cool. Just so we level set, Evan, how large is your development team?
So right now we're at 8 developers, and then, supporting those developers, we have the BA QA roles, a Scrum Master, we're an Agile team. So pretty big team, and you get a team that size, you can really get a good velocity going and deliver a lot of value.
Do your developers have specialties, or do the 8 developers all share the same skill set?
So that's a great question. There's a little bit of a balancing act there. So being a Scrum team, we put a lot of focus into cross-functional roles. So I guess to answer the question, a little bit of both. We try to share responsibilities as much as we can and maintain that cross-functional team. But then at the same time, the technology and software space has gotten so complex that it gets to the point where you have to have some specialization. So within our team, we have roles that focus more on front end or back end, and then as we hire, we try to identify gaps that we might have in our team with skills and then go out and get those people. And, so it's a little bit of a balancing act, like I said.
What type of projects does your team undertake? You mentioned a little bit, you've got some front end and back end. Can you give some examples of things that you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. So a lot of member facing things, an example is e-statements. We built out an e-statements platform, and something like that really traverses the entire stack. There's a lot of back-end processing. There's a lot of UI, a lot of integrations, building the app out so it works with mobile and integrates with online banking. We've rolled out a Skip-a-Pay platform, a platform that allows members to make loan payments both in an authenticated and unauthenticated state. So lots of things that really cover the whole stack, from back-end integration with our core and vendors, and then doing all the pretty front-end stuff that people like to see and what our members see. And then as our team is like a member-focused team, so we kind of start with the member, identifying what do they need, what adds the most value for them, and that's what we build. But in that process, we often end up, there's a lot of back office stuff that needs to happen with a lot of these applications. Like, for say digital account opening, maybe there's something kind of holding up the process for opening that account that needs to be manually taken care of. So we've ended up kind of getting involved with internal applications as well and streamlining some of those processes, because to the member, the member doesn't differentiate between like back office stuff and vendor products, and to them it's just the credit union. So we, our team, we feel we really need to kind of cast a wide net to get that good member experience. So we always start with like the member facing stuff, and then inevitably we find ourselves, kind of like off in the weeds a little bit. But that's good, because that kind of leads to better efficiencies throughout the credit union.
Evan, I think that's interesting. It's an interesting distinction between the back end and the front end, right? Because I think there are sometimes innovations that start on the front end, right, in digital transformation, and end up being business transformational on the back end. Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, that's been exactly our experience. Is kind of everything starts on the front end, and if you keep an open mind and just keep, you know, the goal is like that end-to-end experience, right, for the member. So once you, if you, I think it's tempting oftentimes to have a narrow scope and be like, we need to just roll this product out or this feature. And if you're like, here's what we want to roll out, but anything that needs to be improved as part of that, we're going to take a look at it. Because, if we check the box, but it's a bad member experience, we're not even happy about checking the box then. So it's about like kind of checking the box, but also it makes sense at the end of the day for the member.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You mentioned building platforms, an e-statements platform and a skip and pay platform. Do you have, or does the credit union have interest in selling those services to other credit unions in the future?
So I feel like our credit union has a very entrepreneurial spirit, so I think that's honestly been in the back of the minds of many people here as we built out these products and talked with other credit unions and partners. They'll tell us, hey, there's a lot of demand for what you built, or we've had people say like, this is way better than what you can find out, in the industry. So that certainly like kind of gets our minds going a bit. At some point in the future, could there be an opportunity to create a QSO and get these products out there? And and as I think myself and really everybody on the team, we're excited about the stuff that we're building, and we're always excited when like something goes out to the members and we see them using it. We're excited, like we'll walk through our contact center and see our software up on screens. It's just awesome to see that. So, the idea that it could kind of go beyond these walls is like very exciting. So I personally would love to see that happen. But, there's so much work for us. One of the problems is like, we have this giant backlog, all this stuff we want to deliver, and it's a huge, to be honest, as you know very well, I'm sure it's a huge investment to take something and kind of get it out beyond the walls of an institution. So,
Oh yes, oh yes. There's
yeah,
building something and then there's supporting it, right, and continuing
yes.
its delivery. That is a big difference for sure. That is a big difference for sure. Tell me a little bit about how one of the challenges when I was the CIO was trying to when we made the decision to build, and I'm going to ask you a little bit about how you make that decision to build, but when you make a decision to build, what are the mechanisms you put into place to future proof the development of that solution so that you don't have to come back and support it again a year from now and do a bunch of updates to it? Are there techniques or styles to how you approach the delivery of the solution that help future proof what you build?
Yeah, there's a couple things that we do that I think are key. One is we try to choose technologies and software design patterns that are very industry standard, or in other words, they have a very high level of adoption. So for instance, for our front end technologies, we use React, which has an extremely wide level of adoption and support. So by really trying to stick with mainline technologies, I feel that we set ourselves up, to a little better in the future where we don't run into the scenario where some huge library or technology we're using is being deprecated. So that's definitely key. Another thing we do is, and so I kind of feel one of my Gallup strengths is futurism. It's kind of a bad time to be a futurist, I feel like. I was thinking about this morning, like, I was imagining like the year 1970 and you're a credit union. What do the next 10 years look like from a technology standpoint? 1980 to 1990, or pick a earlier decade. Like, I feel like you had a chance of getting the right answer 10 years out. Whereas today, like, hopefully you don't ask me where I see things in like 2035, because like, the rate of change is accelerating, and it's a bit of my opinion, but I feel like it's a lot harder to predict the future than it was in the past due to that, change acceleration. So where I'm going with all this is one of the things we try to do is maintain agility throughout our applications. In other words, design them and set them up so that they support change. And because, we don't necessarily know what that change is going to be, so we want to kind of maximize their ability to handle any change that may arise, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It's funny you mentioned about the decades. I was having a conversation with a credit union leader, and they said, Kris, the next system I pick for this solution has to last me till 2030. So when you think about that, right, like the next 5-year contract a credit union goes and signs is going to end in 2030. So is the solution I'm choosing today going to be the solution I need in 2030, right? Just from a mental perspective, right? If I'm still buying systems that were designed and built in, the 2000 aughts or the teens, right? We're talking about something that at that point is 15, almost 20 years old in some cases, right? So, and you're against a backdrop of accelerating innovation and new capabilities and new expectations by consumers and members. I think that's a really great point. It's not getting easier. Maybe that's why I stopped writing code. That was one of the questions I wanted to ask you. Do you still write code? And if so, what kind of things do you do?
So I do. My team still lets me write code. Sometimes I think they're just being nice. So coding is one of my passions, of course. So I love to do it, and I also feel that it helps me be a better leader if I have an understanding a little bit of what's going on. So I still write code whenever I can. The type of code I write tends to be a lot of architecture things. So building out maybe the start of a framework, something like that. And then it also tends to be sometimes there's an issue that just nobody wants to deal with. And I feel like as a leader, that's like, the good leaders will like take that stuff on. It's like just some really horrible issue. And I'm like, you know what, I got this. And, and I'll kind of take that on. So.
What's your philosophy on building a team?
So a few things I would say. One is, you don't want people with egos. You want people who have humility, who understand there's more than one way to do things. I certainly think you want diversity. You want people with different backgrounds, different experiences, things like that. So you really kind of are learning from each other. Then I think you want people on the team need to be passionate about what they're doing, because that really creates that like self-motivation and just a better environment to work in.
So tell me a little bit about the growth of your team. Has when you started, what were you a member of the eight? Have you grown it? Where do you think that goes in the future? Do you think you're going to have a larger development team? Do you think you're going to use outside resources? Tell me a little bit about your kind of your strategy for growing the team and the work that you're doing.
Sure. So the team started out as a fairly small team. I actually came on as a contractor initially, and we had 4 developers. And I feel that the credit union had gotten to the point where they had some technology issues, I'll put it that way. So one of those issues was a lot of fragmentation. You know what and that's just kind of natural for any organization is everything is additive. You're adding partners all the time, adding vendors, and they each have their own little world and they may not know about each other. And that creates a very fragmented experience for a member. They may have, you know, 3 different logins to which doesn't make sense for them, right? It's like it's Lake Trust. Why would I need multiple logins? Um, so we had that issue of fragmentation. There was also the issue of, just maybe not getting the best support from vendors and long lead times if you needed something new. So the their answer to those problems was to create this team, and it's initially a small team who could write custom software for members. And we started with online account opening. That was the first product that we rolled out. And then we really just got into a great rhythm. We had great velocity, and we started by building out this services oriented architecture, API driven, which really allowed us to start adding things quickly. Like as we added new features and apps for our members, we were able to use the existing framework we had built for like core integration and LOS integration, all that. So our productivity, I feel, really kind of increased exponentially as time went on. And, then it got to the point where I think people were really feeling the value of all this stuff and they wanted more. They're like, well, if 4 people can do this, 8 people can do more. And, there's a lot of, one thing that I think is really cool is we get people coming to us all the time with ideas. They're like, can you do this, this, this? And that's awesome because that's like the strength of custom development. The answer is like, yes, but it got to the point where it's like, yes, but there's a 2-year backlog. So, we want to do it, but it will take some time. So I think the organization really saw the value of what we had done, and that enabled us to grow the team to increase our velocity even more.
What are the types of challenges that you run into developing custom software for the credit union?
So quite a few challenges. I think, just developing custom software is really difficult overall. And then you add the credit union industry to that. And so being a credit union is very challenging. So you've almost created, this perfect monster of difficulty. Like you're trying to do something very difficult for a difficult industry. So, a lot of the challenges are all of the normal stuff you deal with software development, performance issues in production. How do you deal with all your certificates, all that stuff? But then, you add the credit union side of things into it. And some of the challenges are integrating with older legacy systems, older cores, and these cores, even if you take the same core between 2 credit unions, they've oftentimes been customized. They're not going to work the same way. So you're dealing with all these intricacies in very old systems that have built up over time, and some of the people who have put them in may no longer be here. So that's certainly a challenge, is dealing with all these edge cases, all these kind of ghosts that naturally arise in older systems. Another big challenge is, we're an agile team, but the vendors and partners we deal with may not be agile. So, we pick up a feature to deliver in 2 weeks, and we might need an external API or service, and we, enlist that company, and they're like, all right, we'll get a proposal back in a month, and then it's a 3-month implementation period, and that like really takes the wind out of our sails, so.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's been par for the course for a long time, right? So do you and your team do anything around data analytics and perhaps using usage statistics or analytics that inform your development processes?
We do, definitely. So one of our philosophies as an agile team is that continual incremental improvement of our apps. So what, the challenge is, okay, well, how do you improve your apps? What do you improve? So some of that is easier, like you do a demo and somebody at the credit union is like, hey, that's a bad idea, that's not going to work, and you go back and change it, but then once your apps get out into the wild, how do you identify those methods for improvement? So we use data and analytics and telemetry to really inform those decisions. So we're always looking at that, and I think one of the most common things we analyze, obviously telemetry from production. Are people getting errors? Is something running slow? The real-time stuff. But then a big thing for us is, reducing friction for members. We pride ourselves in how fast if someone wants to open a new account, how fast can they get that done? If someone wants to apply for a loan, how fast can they get that done? So we're always looking at that data in our system, and kind of coming up with any possible way, how can we cut this down? And it's like some of the flows, we're very proud of how streamlined we've made them. And it can be a surprise. You can build something where you're like, people are going to fly through this, and then you look at the data and you're like, oh, wait, and, there's some issue you didn't think about. So, we're always for us, just looking at that data in terms of how well are our members doing in our apps is probably the biggest aspect of analytics we do.
It's 2024, which means we're contractually obligated to ask about artificial intelligence. How do you think artificial intelligence is going to impact software development in the near term?
So in the near term, ChatGPT, GitHub Copilot, all those tools for generating code and analyzing it are going to be used a lot too. And I've used them myself. There's a certain amount of creativity to those tools, surprisingly. So if you're stuck on a coding situation and you ask for some ideas, everybody knows AI it's not perfect. Many times it's given me code that doesn't compile, code that's dangerous. But in doing that, a lot of times I'll see something, I'll be like, hey, I didn't think about that. So, if you look at how the AI models work, they have the temperature aspect to them, meaning, all the large language models currently are essentially predicting what is statistically likely, most likely to be the next token. And a token could be a word or a phrase or a block of code. And they're creating what the statistic likelihood is of the next one. But then they have the temperature aspect where they may at random pick something a little lower statistically. So they may come up with 5 options. There's one at the top, one's a little less likely, but they'll pick that. And from that, you get this creativity of these models, which I think is very beneficial for coding, because there's a lot of creativity involved in software development and problem solving, and AI is like amazingly somewhat uniquely equipped to help in that area, which like 5 years ago everybody was like, you know, the AI, it can't reproduce creativity. Well, actually it seems to do quite well at that.
That's interesting, Ruben. I hadn't even considered the possibility that its role would be kind of helping break those logical log jams that you run into sometimes, right? Like it used to be, it was like go home, sleep on it. Maybe you'll dream about the solution, which has happened, right?
Right.
To many developers, they wake up and they're like, I know how to solve it, right? But
Yeah.
being able to break that log jam in a matter of seconds just by saying, I've got this hairy situation I'm trying to work my way through. Give me some ideas about how to do it. That's a really great use case for AI and software development.
Yeah, and I really like, how you brought up like sleeping on it and you'll have a dream, and
Mm-hmm.
essentially your body is, your brain is solving that problem with creativity. Obviously there's a lot of creativity with a dream,
Right.
except, when there's a production outage, I don't want to have to wait and go home and go to sleep, right? That's, I don't know if my boss would be that happy if he's like, hey, what's your plan to fix this outage? I'm just going to like sleep, just let something come to me. So,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you say, the AI is a shortcut to
Mm-hmm.
getting some of that random creativity.
Yeah, that's a really great idea. What do you think the long term use cases for artificial intelligence look like in the larger credit union industry?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I would say that there's a lot that's going to happen with conversational help for members, and already is happening. But I think that's really going to take off as the models get better and people get more comfortable with AI. I also think that AI will become more specialized, and that will benefit credit unions. So today you have all these large language models, and they're all like, you know, just very broad in their scope and abilities. But I think you'll start to get more and more large language models that are very good at a particular domain, and that particular domain could be credit unions, for example. So
Mm-hmm.
you may have a model that was built just for credit unions. It's a large language model,
Mm-hmm.
several terabytes in size, several gigabytes in size. I don't know how big,
Mm-hmm.
but it's specialized for, the credit union, the needs of credit unions. I think we'll see that happen. And it makes sense. Like, you're going to start with these general models. That would be a little weird if like the chat GPT or OpenAI is like, hey, here's our first model, it's for credit unions, right? You're gonna
Yeah.
first cast a wide net, but then you'll see things get more specialized.
That's a great insight. I think that's very true. How long until you think we see credit union AI engineers? Or do you think we see that at all?
That's a good question. And I think a lot of that ties into like what is the adoption going to look like for credit unions? That's something that's very fascinating to me is when you look at new technologies, it's not just credit unions, but many people, many organizations rather, they have one of two modes. They rush in due to fear of missing out, and when you rush in, you're going to like throw these tools haphazardly at problems and not get any ROI. And then you'll be like, if the tool doesn't work, the technology doesn't work. But then the other aspect is, you know, and you kind of saw this with the cloud, is just a fear of using it at all. So sitting on the sidelines. So the cloud's a great example. If you think about that, you imagine like credit unions in the cloud 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of fear. Like, we can't put our data in the cloud. It has to stay within our walls, and some credit unions are very slow to adopt the cloud. there were also people who were like, we just need to get into the cloud. Like, why? I don't know. We need to go, get there. So you have these two modes, and they're both based on fear, and a lot of times fear is bad when it comes to decision making. So to answer your question in a very roundabout way, I feel it depends on that, like how our credit union is going to approach the adoption. Are they going to do one of those two modes of fear, or kind of the sweet spot? And that's what's going to determine, what the usage looks like over the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, really striking the balance between the two, right? The thing that worries me a little bit about AI is that if and I 100% agree with you. If credit unions take the approach that they did with cloud, they're going to sit on it for 10 years, right? And the problem with that is that to your point, the large language models that are being built won't include them, right? Won't include their input, won't include their data, won't include their what's important to them. And by the time we wake up to it and we say, oh, okay, we are going to do this thing, you've lost 10 years of training, right? And
Exactly. Yeah.
that's a huge amount. That's a huge task to try to overcome, right? That's a huge challenge to try to catch up to when someone's got a 10-year head start and they're training at potentially thousands of times per minute, right? That's really great insight that you need to strike the balance. You can't wait too long, but you don't just start throwing things at it, right?
Yeah, and I think you make a really good point in that AI is cumulative. So there are certain technologies where you can just sit on the sidelines and then be like, okay, I want it. And boom, you just go out and buy it and put it
Right.
in. But like you say, AI is different. If you hop in 5 years later, you've missed out on almost from an AI perspective, an eternity of data.
Yeah. So as we're headed toward planning season for credit unions, what
Yeah.
should executives and boards be thinking about from a technology perspective and ensure that it's part of their future roadmaps?
Yes. So I think probably the most important thing is to keep your focus on the member and what their needs are and focus on agility. So, you know, understand where your member is and what your future members are going to look like. So, every credit union has their unique demographic makeup of members that's going to change in 10 years. So what does that trajectory of change look like? And how does technology change with that trajectory? And then structure your teams. So agility is two things. It's organizational, so the people and the teams have to be agile, but then your software has to be agile as well. And a lot of teams are not agile, and a lot of software isn't agile. So you need to get both of those into that spot. And of course, being agile is not just having stand up meetings or like renaming your project manager role to Scrum Master, right? It's a very shocking change for most organizations, both like on the people side of things and on software. It's a huge change, but I feel like it's critical for success and long-term strategy. Like you can have the best strategy in the world, but like we've talked about, the rate of change is accelerating. I feel things are more unpredictable. You really need to have that agility with your organization and its software and its vendor partners, to be honest, right? We kind of talked about that earlier. Like
Yeah.
our team runs into challenges like, hey, yeah, we can have that ready like a year from now, and that's tough. So
Your partners can either hold you back or help you march at that same agile cadence, right?
exactly.
And that's really around the selection of who you're working with to be able to do that. So, excellent. Well, Evan, I really appreciate you're taking the time out of your busy schedule to meet with us. I think this has been really enlightening, and I've certainly enjoyed it. I hope you have a great day. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Kris. It was awesome to be here, and it was great to talk to you. I had a lot of fun, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
This podcast is sponsored by Constellation. We're empowering community financial institutions with innovative digital solutions, powered by Fintech, driven by your roadmap. Join us as we navigate the future of digital banking together. For more information on how we can be your partner for digital transformation, visit www.constellation.coop.
What a great conversation with Evan. I really appreciate him taking the time to meet with us. If you like the content of this pod, please like and subscribe on your platform of choice. Be sure to check out our audio and LinkedIn channels for some additional content. I want to give a special thanks to Transcend Leadership Center here in Raleigh, North Carolina, who hosted us for the filming of this episode. For more information about their services, please see the link in the show notes. Thank you very much for watching. We will see you next time.